Now, Martin, let's talk about the single biggest problem in my life.
Is it the electric scooter that's gathering dust in your cupboard, as we learned about in recent episodes? Is that the grievance that you're going to use this podcast to address once again?
It's even worse than that, Martin. It's the problem that it's basically impossible to buy a loaf of bread at 5 p.m. on a Sunday.
Yeah, James, it's really annoying. Quite often on a Sunday evening, I really fancy a big loaf of bread and I just can't find one anywhere. It's quite annoying.
Yeah, this is what annoys me. So you want to do some shopping. It's a Sunday evening. You live near a slightly larger supermarket rather than a convenience store, and you can't because of England's absurd Sunday trading laws. And I do mean England there because Scotland doesn't have any truck with this nonsense. And I want to talk about it this week because according to The Grocer magazine, which I'm sure everyone listening is a regular reader of, the government is reportedly, quote, revisiting proposals to relax restrictions on shops opening on a Sunday.
So what's prompted that?
So apparently the idea is being discussed as we speak in the Department of Business and in the Treasury. And it's basically the result of a quid pro quo with big business. So in the forthcoming budget, which we now know is going to be in November, Rachel Reeves is thinking about hiking business rates to bring in some more money from big businesses and then to cut rates, I think, to help out small businesses. And then to keep big business happy, she's going to basically say, well, why not open later on a Sunday? Everyone wins. And if this does happen, then I think this is really good news. And I'm quite excited about the idea because it's just a really annoying thing to me. I hate the fact that Sundays are so restricted. And I guess more broadly and more importantly, I think this could also be a relatively easy win for sort of stimulating a bit more economic growth and getting the economy moving. Because if shops can open for longer hours, then it stands to reason that more economic activity will happen.
So this is kind of an interesting question, right? Because people often say that, like, if shops can open longer, there'll be more economic activity. But is there actually evidence for that? Like, do we know that that's the case?
Yeah, so maybe I'm overstating it, and maybe I really just do want to buy bread at 5 p.m. on a Sunday, because the evidence is mixed, I'd say. So there's not actually that much to go on. So in 2006, the Department of Trade and Industry, which is what the business department was called about 4 names ago, there was some sort of independent study they commissioned, which reckons it could add £1.4 billion to our GDP annually. That was 2 decades ago now, and the economy has changed since, and the world has changed since, so who knows how relevant that is. More recently, in 2016, there was a study or a campaign by the New West End Company, which is like the lobby group for Oxford and Regent Street in London. They said that if you extended opening hours there by just 2 hours, it could bring in an extra 190 to 290 million pounds every year, because tourists in London would have more opportunities to spend their money before flying away again. So again, I'm not entirely sure how well that scales outside of tourist areas. And there are more sceptical arguments that if we opened up Sunday trading and let shops open whenever they want, it wouldn't create more activity, but it would just shift it around a bit. But all that said, Martin, I still think this is a good idea. And that's because I think there's a strong circumstantial case that this would support growth. Because basically, the current Sunday trading restrictions, which, as we all know, shops can't open for more than 6 hours on a Sunday, I think this is an example of what economists call deadweight loss. So, the cost of all the sorts of inefficiencies in a system. So with current hours so restricted, if you go to the supermarket on a Sunday, you'll probably find yourself queuing for much longer or getting stuck in traffic. And it's just harder to get around because everyone's trying to fit that same activity into the same window of time when they could be doing something more productive instead. And I also think as well, in an era where we have the internet, where when shops are closed, we can just order things online. Maybe this could actually help our high streets. People traditionally think big box stores, big large supermarkets hurt the high streets. But if shops are open, then that now gets people out of their homes. Maybe if people are coming back and forth from the larger supermarkets, maybe they'll be thinking, well, let's go to a local restaurant, or let's do some sort of leisure activity outside away from our screens. And I just think basically, fundamentally, I can't get beyond it, Martin. Sunday trading laws, they're just really dumb.
I mean, I think you lack imagination, James. I'd like to see Sunday trading laws extended and made even more absurd. So perhaps we could close the internet from 4 p.m. on a Sunday afternoon and stop online shopping as well, drive people to the stores instead. But no, I mean, you've used a lot of fancy economic language there, James, and some less fancy language. Is it not just the fact that you're an atheist and you hate Jesus, that you just don't respect our holiest of days?
Well, I think this gets a bit at why the law is so absurd. So the current restrictions have been in place since 1994, and there's been various sort of failed attempts to liberalise the law since. And every time it's come up against a campaign group called Keep Sunday Special. And their argument is, well, we should be, using Sundays to spend time with our families or to, be worshipping or whatever. But it just seems bizarre to me because Britain obviously isn't a monoculture. It wasn't in 1994, even less so is now. So the idea that people are going to do these very prescriptive things, I think, is just a bit silly, especially as well when the current law allows literally almost everything else to open up. It's just like large supermarkets in B&Q which are being screwed by this. So it seems like a really specific thing. And anyway, I think if Jesus really is as great as people says he is, then surely going on about love thy neighbour surely that should hold its own against, every little helps.
So I think one of the things that makes this whole thing incredibly challenging is just how confusing it is, right? So even when I was growing up, places were often closed on Wednesday afternoons, and now we have Sunday trading laws, but they apply differently to different places, and you sort of have to have this constant battle with yourself, or check in with Google to figure out like which thing is open to what time. Is it 11 till 5? Is it 9 till 4? It's very confusing. So what exactly are the current restrictions?
Yeah, so it is a bit confusing. And our Sunday trading laws are by far not the worst in Europe. In other countries, in places like Germany and Switzerland, they allow supermarkets to only open on a Sunday if they're in a train station. So you get like really outsized supermarkets in train stations, or everyone heading down to the train station just to do their shopping on a Sunday. But anyway, so in Britain, the law currently is supermarkets, stores over 280 metres squared large, which is basically a bit larger than a tennis court.
Oh, well, we've all got tennis courts, so
Yeah.
that's a very easy comparison to make.
I tried
Thank
to
you.
pick the
Thank
most
you for
relatable
clarifying that.
analogy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you're smaller than 280 meters, you can open whenever you want, no restrictions. If you're larger, then you're only allowed to open for a maximum of 6 hours on a Sunday, and you can pick any time in an 8-hour window from 10 a.m. until 6 p.m.
So this does just seem anachronistic and fussy and annoying, and liberalizing the law sounds like a great idea that kind of most people would be behind. But if that's the case, why hasn't it been done yet? Why has it taken 30 years since the last reform?
Well, so the funny thing about this debate is it sort of screws around with the political coalitions and like who's for and against it. And you end up with like really conservative religious people teaming up with like left wing trade unions. So one of the biggest arguments against opening up the Sunday trading laws is the trade unions, who obviously have a very strong influence on the Labour Party. They don't want the law loosened because it could conceivably, in their view, make it easier to exploit workers or force people to work on a day when, you previously had legal protections to stop you being forced to work there. And I get that because I used to work in a shop and it was really hard work. So people like that can get exploited quite easily. And then there's the argument as well made by groups like the FSB, not Putin's security services, but the Federation of Small Business. And basically, there's more a sort of self-interest argument. So they say if big shops can open, then theoretically that hurts the small businesses as Sunday restrictions. It's basically like a de facto subsidy to small corner shops and the like, and independent stores that are smaller. And basically that's achieved by restricting supply of alternatives in the form of big supermarkets. But ultimately, I just don't really buy any of these arguments.
Is that because we're recording this on a Sunday afternoon and the shops have just closed?
So the trade union argument, right? I, again, raise my fist in the air. I'm with the workers on this, but I don't think there's any reason you couldn't loosen the rules on the opening times of shops while retaining worker protections for Sundays, or you could make the law so people can pick a day when they can't be forced to work. You can say to businesses open up, but still maybe you've got to pay people slightly more to work on those days, or you can't sack someone if they don't want to work because they're religious or something like that.
Yeah, you mean like podcasters, like the way I'm forced to record this podcast on a Sunday afternoon by my militant capitalist boss.
Absolutely, Martin. And, smaller businesses as well. I'm sympathetic to the argument in principle because you get your local convenience store at the end of the road. And I want like walkable communities where people don't have to take their car to go and buy essentials. But the reality is that, smaller shops are increasingly the chains anyway. So like 29%, according to one study, of convenience stores are operated by chains, your Tesco Expresses and your Sainsbury's Locals and the like. Tesco, for example, they've got over 2,000 Tesco Express stores today, and they say 77% of people in Britain live within 10 minutes drive of one. Incidentally, the first time Tesco opened an Express store was 1994, so clearly they saw the change in the law and thought, well, we can we can adapt our stores to work with this new law. And here's another thing, Martin. Here's my most annoying opinion, which everyone will secretly agree with, but find infuriating, right? That these chains, I think, are better than independent stores. And obviously we all like the idea of the independent small trader. I can see you've got your head in your hands as I'm defending the capitalist extractive system here. But the reason they're better is because supermarkets are like a miracle of logistics, right? So, if you have a bigger chain, a bigger store providing stuff with complex supply chains, you can have more products available, you can have better, more reliable stock, you have higher quality goods that's fresher and so on. Instead of the local shop going to a cash and carry and buying a box of crisps and then leaving it in a storeroom for however long and bringing it in a van or whatever, instead you have supermarket sized logistics, which means you can maintain better hygiene, you can maintain a cold chain as you bring stuff from distribution centers to shops, and it just works out better, doesn't it? Is that a horrible thing to say?
I'll just add corner shop owners to, residents from Cambridge and whoever else is on the long list of people that we've now offended on this podcast, James. Okay, so how realistic is it? Is there a genuine prospect that the law might finally be about to change and at least one of your long list of grievances from this podcast is actually going to be dealt with?
Martin, you can't chastise me for using this podcast for settling scores here, because I think you're winning on that front at the moment. So, but this is the mad thing, right? So I can't claim any particular insight here other than beyond what the grocer is reporting, but it seems to be well sourced. And they say basically it's not like there's a law that's been proposed. There's nothing been published about it on gov.uk, but they say discussions are going on inside government about doing this. And here's the crazy thing about this, and this is going to be needlessly self-aggrandizing, but I sort of think it might be my fault that this is being talked about.
I mean, really, James? Really? Really?
So, okay, I don't think I actually believe this. Well, maybe I do. I don't know. I wrote a piece on my Substack a few weeks ago about Sunday trading, maybe about a month ago, where I basically made a similar argument to the one I just made to you about it being terrible for all these different reasons. I published it on there, and then the next day, our friends at the think tank Labour Together, they saw my post and they commissioned a poll of the general public to see what people actually think about this. And that was hilarious in its own right. Someone commissioned a poll off the back of something I'd written, which was very, very funny. But the mad thing was, it came back, and it turns out this is probably the one issue in the world where I'm on the popular side of public opinion.
Good Lord.
So Labour Together, they asked if people thought the Sunday trading laws should be devolved down to local authorities. So not an outright sort of liberalisation. It should be the local council gets to decide whether shops can open longer. This was actually something the coalition government tried to do, and I think it was 2015, one of David Cameron's last things he did in office before the referendum and so on. And it came back. And again, I want to emphasise, this is a real scientific poll. This isn't just a clicker on Twitter or something. This is a real thing. And it came back and found that 22% of people strongly support the idea of changing the law, 25% of people somewhat support it, and just 12% strongly oppose and 14% somewhat oppose. In other words, it's 46% of people on my side, the side of righteousness and justice, and 26% of people who are wrong.
So almost half, basically. This is where we are. Nearly half of people, not quite, but almost half, agree with you.
Perhaps, but we've got the plurality, and that's the main thing, Martin. And amazingly, Martin, this is actually consistent across demographics, however you slice them. So most of the major political parties supported changing the law, but guess which one didn't?
Was it Reform again?
Not quite, Martin. It was, of course, the Greens, because they hate progress, apparently.
Amazing. Left Reform.
Exactly. So just to be clear, Labour, Tory, Lib Dem, even Reform voters want to get rid of the Sunday trading laws. So if this happens, I am going to fully, unfairly, completely unjustifiably take credit for this, because maybe someone in the Treasury or DBT saw the Labour Together polling. Maybe, and this is going to sound massively arrogant, maybe they read my Substack post about this, because I know I have readers inside those departments. Maybe it sparks the idea in someone's head that this is something they could change, because it's the sort of thing that you don't really think about until someone says, oh yeah, that is stupid. So maybe this could be it.
Nobody's ever thought of opening a shop on a Sunday, James, so clearly must have been you. But thanks for your efforts anyway. And I guess also just to clarify for people, when we talk about The Grocer, that is a magazine for supermarkets, not for large German people. Just to be clear on that.